as Khalistani extremists or K extremists staged coordinated protests attacking Hindu devotees and provoking altercations. Offensive slogans against Bharat, biased responses by the Canada police, attacking peaceful Hindu protesters and letting the K goons have a free run have once again outed Justin Trudeau's sympathy for K goons. The Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton was hosting a consular camp organized by the High Commission of India to provide documentation services for local Indian origin residents on the 3rd of November, that is Sunday. Approximately 30 to 35 K extremists gathered outside the temple carrying offensive images showing Indian diplomats depicted in violent ways and posters with derogatory slogans targeting India and Hindus. They began shouting slogans in favor of Khalistan, with some calling for violence against Indians and Indian origin diplomats. At 12:15 p.m. Canada time, the protesters verbally abused temple attendees, including women and children. After a brief altercation due to their aggressive stance, they proceeded to physically attack devotees with Khalistani flags and sticks, injuring several people. At 12:30 p.m. Canada time, videos of the attack began circulating on social media, drawing attention and concern from the broader community. At 1 p.m. local time in Canada, in response, about 150 local Hindus spontaneously gathered outside the temple to protect their place of worship. By 3:30 p.m., the crowd of Hindu devotees had grown to around 200 people. The K extremists began to disperse, taking down their offensive signs. Around the same time, the Lakshmi Narayan Mandir in Surrey was targeted by these K extremists. A planned protest by K supporters was advertised in advance, targeting the temple with hateful and offensive messaging. Around 12 noon, around 12 K extremists arrived with large posters bearing anti-Bharat, anti-Modi and Hindu-phobic messages, along with imagery amplifying K terrorist Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. The cops arrived, stating they were there to ensure a peaceful protest. The K protesters then used loudspeakers to broadcast derogatory slogans, prompting the Hindu attendees to respond by chanting Jai Shri Ram over their own speakers. This is the entire timeline that we're putting out. What actually happened? Police randomly arrested 3 Hindu protesters in Surrey who were reportedly peaceful and non-violent. Among those detained was a teenager who was forcefully slammed to the ground by 3 officers. Another arrest involved a young man standing on the temple property. Despite not engaging in any aggression, he was singled out by a police officer identified by badge number 363 who threatened others with arrest. Look at the amount of force that's being used by the cops on those who are not even involved in any kind of violence or protest. These were the people whose place of worship was being attacked, assaulted and being derided by the K extremists, and not one of them has been arrested. A Canadian cop was suspended after he was seen participating with pro-Khalistani groups that launched an attack on Hindus at the Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton. The suspended cop, identified as Harinder Sohi, was caught on camera holding a K flag or a Khalistan flag as others in the protest chanted anti-India slogans. He served as a sergeant of the Peel Regional Police. Peel Regional Police confirmed they were aware of an online video that depicted an off-duty officer actively participating in the demonstration.
I think what happened yesterday at the Hindu temple in Canada was obviously deeply concerning. You would have seen the statement first by our official spokesperson and also the expression of concern by our Prime Minister yesterday. That should, I think, convey to you how deeply we feel about it.
Mr. Speaker, we strongly condemn acts of violence, hate that took place outside Hindu Sabha Mandir and Guru Singh Sabha Gurdwara. These acts need to stop. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their places of worship. I've spoken to Peel Regional Police Chief Nish and have full confidence in our local authorities to investigate and to de-escalate. As Canadians, Mr. Speaker, we must stand united against hate and against all those who try to destabilize peace and unity between our communities. Thank you.
Now, Indo-Canadians united to send a strong message to Justin Trudeau. Thousands of Indo-Canadians marched in solidarity outside the Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton a day after it was attacked by these pro-K extremists. Now, the march on Monday night was organized by the Coalition of Hindus in North America. The participants carried the flags of Canada and Bharat As well as those chanting Bharat Mata Ki Jai slogans, they also sang the Canadian national anthem in solidarity with everyone and with the Canadian flag, saying that this is their country of residence, but they deserve to be left in peace and to be allowed that their places of worship are not places of assault and intimidation and violence. People shouted anti-Khalistan slogans and urged Justin Trudeau to change his ways and mend his ways. Prime Minister Narendra Modi condemned the attacks on Monday, asking the Canadian government to ensure justice and uphold the rule of law. This was his first statement against the ongoing violence by these pro-K supporters on Canadian soil. Daniel Boardman, Canadian journalist, joins us. Dr. Anand Ranganathan, author and political commentator and scientist, joins us. Ramneek Singh Mann, activist, with us. Manish Puri, spokesperson of VHP Canada, with us. Mehak Kapoor, Indian journalist in Canada, who is part of this protest, is also with us. Mehak, namaste, and namaste to all the other gentlemen. Thank you very much. I'm going to first start with Mehak. Can you please tell us what happened? Were you part of this counter-protest on Monday night? Can you take us through what happened and what did you witness?
Good morning, Anand. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here. Yes, I was very much part of the protests that occurred in Brampton. I mean, in the recent incident, what we've seen, Khalistani extremists have been observed, wielding weapons and intimidating peaceful protest. The time when we were there in Brampton, we did witness them spraying pepper spray at a few men peacefully protesting outside the temple on Monday. We did see a few hooligans trying to, come in the protest and start with their slurs again and again. The peace has been the peace has been questioned over here, Anand. The perceived lack of action has led a coalition of North America, as we all know, all the Hindus joining to call upon the Canadian government. We have to pressurize them to feel safe out here, Anand.
But is it true that there was another attempt after this pro-protest last evening by these K extremists to further surround the Hindu Sabha Mandir yet again? Because there is a video that's doing the rounds with a huge presence of police cars. The Peel police seems to be far more active on Monday night compared to Sunday.
Yes, very much true. I genuinely feel the Peel regional police is supporting the Khalistani gang. The inaction from authorities has left a once trusting community, questioning its safety and belonging in Canada. They have attacked once again, paper spray, they've been carrying swords, the weapons, trying to intimidate us. Rather, we were just holding our Indian flags on Monday night. The police has been more active on Monday. Rather, they should be active on Sunday when they were very much aware that they are doing peaceful protest. But they were trying to, and they are still trying to protect the K gang, as we've been calling them.
But please tell me, there are reports that Gurdwara was also surrounded by the Hindu protesters. Was there violence there? Did you try and break into the Gurdwara? What had happened there in Malton, at the Malton Gurdwara?
So the Malton Gurdwara, I was not there, Anand, but my friends, and there are videos circulating on social media. They have been seen carrying swords, lathis, and a brick, trying to haunt us, trying to intimidate us with those weapons, where they were seen carrying those swords and stuff like that. They're just trying to intimidate. Rather, that's what I just mentioned before as well, Anand. We were just seen carrying Indian flags. But in Malton area, that's one of the areas really much intimidated by the Khalistani gang. And we have seen that in the videos as well, that they're trying to start the hooligan, they're trying to become what they shouldn't be doing that, where we all expect safety out here.
So they're trying to resort to hooliganism. Daniel Boardman is there. He was right in the thick of all the action. You've been posting a lot of videos. Take us through what you saw there and what was the reaction of the locals. Because there are also efforts to push a very different story altogether of what has happened. And somewhere the K extremists are being painted as the victims here and the Hindu Sabha members as the ones who are trying to flex muscle. Is that true, Daniel?
Well, I mean, the narrative trying to put out, that's not true, Hunter, in totality. So what happened last night is there was a massive rally on the temple grounds to, support the community, to put pressure on the police and politicians who failed them. The general consensus of the Hindu community is no one has our back. The politicians have failed us. The police have failed us. Religious freedom is under attack. And we want to protect our rights as Canadians. So there was a very peaceful protest, or you could say a rally on Temple Hill, and then people went inside the temple for further meetings inside. I was there for some of that, and then outside the temple, sort of, that's where things got a bit rowdy, where there was a crowd outside, and then I wasn't there. I was more inside, but from what I heard outside is, as they went outside, more and more police presence came in, and because the community doesn't have a good relationship with the police right now, things got a bit testy, and then there were constantly, if people would hear rumors of a Khalistani attack, and people would run out of the temple and go to the thing. Now, that wasn't really true, but that kind of added to the crowd outside as people would hear rumors of potential Khalistani attacks outside. And then, there were the videos being shown of the Khalistanis in their own Gurdwara with swords ready. And it got everyone pretty hyped up. And then there was sort of a crowd of, you could say, youth who a couple hours after the rally had left the premises of the temple and sort of doing their own thing, roaming around the city. And again, I wasn't there for that, so I don't quite know. But to the point of the narrative, it is very clear that the narrative trying to be spun by the Canadian establishment and those of pro-Khalistani sympathies is they want to do Sikhs versus Hindus. Whereas it's Khalistanis versus reasonable people. But by trying to play up, we think, well, it looks to me, but by trying to play up the potential attack, was a Gurdwara surrounded, was this and that, what they want to do is they want to say, oh, Hindu temples were attacked, Sikh temples were attacked. The wave of violence and the clashes, because when it's two sides, they can just say, oh, it's clashes and tension and all violence is wrong, right? That gives them the ability to not name the problem, which is Khalistani extremism, which is, hey, is there a photo of Tawinder Parmar inside that Gurdwara where he's popped up as a great shaheed? Is that not a question we should ask about this? But for most parts, it was peaceful, but there has been a breakdown in trust completely with the cops in the Hindu community. I mean, it's absurd that the temple was attacked physically. They went into the grounds, and there's been no attempt by any level of politician or police to sort of outreach to the community, outreach to the temple, try and build relations like there would be with any other situation. The shafting of the temple after this egregious attack has been noted. And it is not increasing relations well.
Let me ask you before I bring in Manish and Ramneek and Anand Ranganathan here. Daniel, you question the attitude of the cops. Do you believe, personally as an individual, that the cops have been partisan? And why do you believe so? The other aspect, there are so many of these goons who are still there in these videos on the screen that's running. They're all there. Their faces are clear that they're walking into the temple premises, picking up and, hurling punches, using their sticks and beating up people. Has any of them been arrested so far?
No Khalistanis have been arrested to my knowledge there. And, and if you want to say, are the police force infiltrated with radical ideologues from different communities? Probably, most likely. I've seen them recruit for RCMP and police officers in the most radical Muslim Brotherhood affiliated mosques in Toronto. So I don't see why the same people who would recruit from the Muslim Brotherhood wouldn't also recruit from the Khalistanis. I mean, remember, Canadian institutions have no idea what's going on in anything. They don't understand the difference between Khalistan and Sikhs. They don't understand the difference between a Muslim Brotherhood operative and a normal Muslim man. They don't understand any of this. They're not willing to understand it. Mostly they're too scared. And a lot of cops do know the problems and are very aware of it and want this to stop, but top down it's been corrupted. The political levels. So lieutenants, chiefs, the Peel Region Police Board, all of that's been politically corrupted.
Manish Puri, so far, have the authorities reached out to the Hindu groups, the coalition, after the protest, after the demands, seeking an apology, seeking arrests? Has anything happened? I'm going to try. I think we've just temporarily lost Manish Puri there. We'll try and go back to him. Ramnik Man, I'm sure you're in touch with a lot of people there, present there. There are sangatans or groups that have come out and condemned all of this. They've called out the Khalistani extremism, including a lot of Sikh groups, and a lot of the other gurdwaras have said that what's happening is wrong. But what beyond that?
And, a few quick points.
Ji.
The first thing first is old Hindi saying, "Saiya bhai kotwal to fir dar kaayega." When the Prime Minister of the country is giving you patronage and is giving you a free run and giving you a loose rope, this all started with initially, it was they were trying to test waters when they vandalized temples, discredited the walls. And then, we could have seen these Khalistani elements trying to get into mandirs before at night. Not in broad daylight like they've done this time. But also, it is very alarming for a lot of Canadians to see this kind of a situation arising in Canada. 2-3 very, again, relevant points here. These terrorist elements, these sympathizers of terrorists or people who give cover or intellectual cover fire or political cover fire to these Khalistani or these terrorist elements have penetrated the landscape of the Canadian judicial system, the Canadian police, the Canadian polity, the business scope. They are all over. And that is why, being less in number, they still have a say. Can you imagine Harjinder Soi is a cop?
Yeah.
And he's involved in protests, and as a result of which you see that a teenager is being pinned down. It reminded me of the event in the US when the whole Black Lives Matter thing ran. But what gives me encouragement also is that eventually I see the Hindu community in Canada waking up and rising up, and the slogan which had come "Batoge to Katoge" is actually very relevant and very practical all over the world, not just in India, but also in Canada, and more so in Canada, as a matter of fact. And you have to remain united, and this is something which I have been asserting, Anand, is to divide Hindus and Sikhs amongst themselves. This is an attempt to create a wedge between two brothers, the elder and the younger one, and it should not succeed at any cost. This is how I look at it. Now, it also amounts to this, Anand, give me a few more seconds.
Ji.
If they are able to extract a retaliation against minority Sikhs in India, they will again get a victim card or a scope of victimhood again for themselves. This is something which is unacceptable to any Indian, any Sikh.
Yeah.
These people should not be addressed to as Sikhs, because these are not the Sikhs of Guru Nanak, these are not the Sikhs of Guru Gobind Sahib, who had been a Pagoti, that is Ma Bhagwati Pag. And the last time we got together was on Deepavali. And if you remember, Anand pulled out the Khalsa Raj flag.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in any which case, this is absolutely unacceptable. The only bright side of the entire incident which has happened or unfolded yesterday, or it's been happening for years now, is that Hindus and Indians and Sikhs in Canada in particular have got united. They have come together to fight against these terrorists in Canada. That's the only bright side I see today.
But Dr. Manish Puri is also with us. Manish Puri, have the authorities reacted? We lost you when I asked you. Have the authorities reached out to the coalition of Hindus post the protest last night? Have they given any assurance of action against these K extremists? Or any arrests?
Well, Anand, I have not heard about any arrests so far. There had been a meeting last night at the Gurdwara with a few police officials. We are still awaiting what came out of it. But as was mentioned earlier, I think by Daniel and also Mehak, that there has not been an overtly, an overt outreach by any of the administration on law enforcement officials to say, we are pained, this is not going to happen again. We are going to make sure the steps are going to be in place that, Hindu community feels they are safe in Canada. So that kind of an outreach is missing. What we are seeing so far are very, very subtle messages, like for the sake of putting a message out there. So the Hindu community is seeing that, and they are annoyed, they are angry, they are worried about their kids, their family, the entire community. And the good part is that they are at least starting to come, as Ramneek said, they are coming together along with the Sikh brothers and saying enough of this, and we got to put an end to this. Because the silent majority, if they keep silent, this is going to get even worse. And I think Dr. Ranganathan has been saying, this is relevant for all Hindus across the globe. We got to get more politically assertive. We got to actually join right from the local level to the provincial level to the federal level. The Khalistanis have actually perfected a model. They have infiltrated across the board in all institutions, in media, in possibly law enforcement, in administration. So everybody is keeping mum on these activities. And we got to start getting organized. We don't have to think about individual organization or an individual. We got to get united and have one voice.
One voice is important, but along with that, a certain level of influence and currency within the administration and a political advisory as a grouping. I think this is something which has been noted even in the US, where a lot of the senators, a lot of the council members, a lot of the representatives take the Indian community, local Hindu community, Indo-American community also lightly, because they go there, have a cup of tea, click a few selfies, and they get huge amounts of donation, but there are no demands made. Compared to some of the other lobbies which are far more stronger and far more exacting, and say that if you want something from us, you got to give us something in return. And that kind of lobbying, which is actually legal in America and Canada, should be far more active, because the size, the numbers have to come through. And Dr. Ranganathan, are you happy to see that at least there is a certain level of cohesion among groups to say that we got to protect our rights? But more importantly, is this falling on deaf ears? Is that a concern for you?
3 points here. First of all, good evening, Anand, to you and to my fellow panelists. A lot of probably wonderful and excellent points raised here. I just want to add to this discussion with 3 very brief points. Number 1, with your permission, I'd like to start with asking you a multiple choice question. Anand, a Hindu temple is attacked by a rampaging mob carrying swords and sticks. Hindu devotees are manhandled. The police comes in, but the police is completely in cahoots. The police encourages the rampaging mob. In fact, some part of the rampaging mob are actually part of the police off duty. The politicians cushion this crime. The country this is happening is in A, Canada, B, Pakistan, C, Bangladesh, D, all of the above. Could you please answer that, Anand? You know the answer. It is D, all of the above.
I'm inclined to say D, all of the above. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Canada is the new Pakistan. Let's be as blunt about it. That's the fact. The question now arises is, having answered the multiple choice question, what do Hindus do next? Do we look at the situation of Hindus in Pakistan and Bangladesh and extrapolate to that what is happening in Canada? Or do we actually believe that Canada is different from Pakistan and Bangladesh? I still tend to believe that Canada is much more law-abiding and respecting of the general law than Pakistan and Bangladesh, because those are not religious agnostic countries, and the antagonism that Hindus have faced traditionally in those areas. So yes, there is still some hope. But as Manish ji said, as Ramneek ji reiterated, that hope is fading fast. Because, and to talk about a little bit about what Daniel also mentioned, every strata of the Canadian society has been very carefully infiltrated by the Khalistani elements. In fact, I would disagree a little with Manish ji and say that Khalistanis have perfected a model. No, they are replicating the Islamist model. Exactly this the Islamists have done in London or in other areas. The Khalistanis are replicating this model, infiltrating in the media, in the police, so that when you cry for help to these pillars of democracy, including the legislature, including the executive, I don't know about the judiciary as yet, but who knows? The fact of the matter is there is very little Hindus can do. That is the reason why I started with asking that multiple choice questions. Is Canada going the Pakistan and Bangladesh way as far as Hindus are concerned? The answer is yes. But here, little bit of hope I want to give, because Ramneek, and by the way, you should be anointed as the honorary Sikh. I'll tell you why, Anand. Because of you took the mainstreaming of the fact that Hindus and Sikhs have always been one, they will always be one. And when you showed this flag, which I in fact showed yesterday on Rahul's debate as well, this is the territory of Maharana Ranjit Singh. You can see it almost covers half of Pakistan.
Right.
And this is the proposed map of Khalistan. There is not an inch of Pakistan. That itself tells you the nefarious designs of these Khalistanis who propped up. And of course, as Ramneek mentioned, when you show the flag of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, you see Ma Durga in the middle, flanked by Hanuman and Bhairav. So we have always been one. These Khalistanis are not Sikhs. They are anything but Sikhs. So I stand with Ramneek there. These are the 2 points I wanted to make.
Well,
is India safe from them? I would like to believe we are.
Well, here is a commitment that we have made to ourselves here on the right stand, that we will always continue to, whenever we have a discussion on these K extremists, we will end the conversation with a reminder of the Sanatan Sikh Connect. And that's what we're going to put out as we end this discussion. Here on the right stand, ladies and gentlemen, we threw light on how K agenda stood for anything but the true tenets of Sikhism. The Khalistan map leaves all of Pakistan, which existed during the Sikh Empire in 1839 under Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and includes everything which was outside the Sikh Empire. The sovereign territories of Bharat are the target, not just Punjab. The secessionists want parts of Himachal, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand and Haryana, while they leave out all of Punjab, in Pakistan, certain parts of Afghanistan, Gilgit-Baltistan and also Chinese occupied territory, erstwhile, and also Tibet. Those are the areas which should have been part of their map. That's not reflecting there. Secondly, as Dr. Ranganathan said, a flag of Maharaja Ranjit Singh's army depicts the war-inspiring goddess Chandi right in the middle. There she is, Durga. And this is what Sikhi was, the sword arm of Sanatan. Along with, on the right and left, is Hanuman and Bhairav. The Sikh warriors use symbols of Hinduism before warfare, and here the K-Bogi spews venom against Sanatan Astha in Canada. And thirdly, the Brahm Kavach. This is what Ramneek Maan had mentioned the other day. The Dasam Granth of Guru Gobind Singh says, you are the goddess of creation, you are Lakshmi and Vishnu, Vishnu's power, you are of Shiva himself, the Shakti of Shakta. This mantra invoking gods Sanatan Pratha were supposed to be read 32 times daily as per the Dasam Granth for fearlessness, protection, fortune, wealth and good health. Need we say more, ladies and gentlemen, how convoluted and far from reality is this entire K-Bogi and K narrative, and how connected Sanatan and Sikhi are. And on that note, we're going to take a very, very short break. When we come back, ladies and gentlemen, a fierce counter to Mizoram Chief Minister's anti-Bharat pitch. And this is coming in once again from voices within the northeast of Bharat. Stay with us.
This Diwali.
So it's the big election in America between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. While there is so much interest in India and around the world as to who will become the next president of the United States, it ultimately boils down to a bunch of swing states, some important communities, whether they show up at the vote or not. We'll also talk about the Indian American community, whether they are overwhelmingly Democrat or they split. Let's try and find a little bit more about this U.S. election, which is being closely watched, with Dhruv Jaishankar, Executive Director with ORF America. Thank you very much, Dhruv, for speaking with us. So, big picture, I mean, we're a day away from Election Day. Just how big is this election? What are the stakes?
It's a big election. It feels like every 4 years there's a big election in the US. It's a very divided polity. Roughly 45% of Americans vote Republican, 45% vote Democrat. And really it's only about 5 to 10% whose opinion has to be swayed each election. And the divides are quite deep across age lines, gender lines, cultural lines, rural, urban. I think there's a big divide there. So I think this is playing out again as it is every 4 years.
What do you think it'll boil down to? I mean, in such a close race, is it the swing states? Is it Who's motivated more? Is it anti-incumbency? What's the big X factor?
There are lots of X factors, which is what's making it hard to predict. The polls show pretty much a 50-50 split. 7 states will really determine this election. They're called the swing states. I find it hard to believe the winner will not be the winner of Pennsylvania. I think that will be a state that just mathematically, unless many other results go in a very unexpected manner, that's a state that both either candidate will have to win the election.
That's the biggest
prize.
swing state.
Okay. And the margins are going to be very thin. So ultimately it'll come down to voter enthusiasm for the two candidates. Whether more of Trump supporters come out to vote on election day, or whether more of Harris's voters come out. And that will happen tomorrow, and that will really determine the outcome.
So, one interesting thing, and I guess in elections past, other than the 2021, one new phenomenon we've seen is a lot of people are voting early.
Yes.
Either by post or by mail-in, by in-person early voting. I think 75 million is the figure that I last checked. That's almost half the electorate.
Yes.
Is there anything in there for us to know that's perhaps the way in which this election is going?
So that has really changed a large part because of COVID. The last election happened during the pandemic, and that led to a lot more early voting. Traditionally, early voting has favored Democrats, and so those are counted later. That suggests that in many states we'll see a blue wave, a Democratic swing later. But it really will depend on a number of other factors. One of the things that's happened this time is this signs that more Republicans are voting
early. Okay.
So the balance may not be as skewed towards Democrats as in the past. But again, we'll only know after counting is completed.
Let's talk a little bit about the Indian American community. There's about 2.5 million of them. On Monday, here on The Right Stand, we showed you how Mizoram Chief Minister's speech in the United States about 2 months ago went viral on social media and sparked fresh controversy. He openly called for the unity of the Zo, Chin, Kuki, Mizo. These are the 3 tribes based in Mizoram and Myanmar, and also certain parts of Manipur. This entire community spread across Myanmar, Bangladesh and Bharat based on ethnic and religious lines. The development comes amid ethnic tension between the Meitei and the Kuki communities in neighbouring Manipur. Mizoram Chief Minister Lalduhoma called upon the Zo people to unite based on religion and prevent further division.
It's just like a two-way traffic. As far as we are concerned, we shall never ever accept the division of our people into 3 countries. This will never be acceptable. And the boundaries are imposed boundaries by the British government. In that committee, we are never represented. We are never consulted. Therefore, it is an imposed boundary. We'll never accept it. We'll never accept construction of boundary fencing in between us.
And now we have the first response to the Mizoram Chief Minister's anti-Bharat pitch from its bordering state, Manipur. The Co-Coordinating Committee on Manipur Integrity, or the COCOMI, represented by spokesperson Althoba, has issued a strong condemnation. This happened earlier in the day, of recent statements made by the Mizoram Chief Minister Lalduhoma. Addressing a gathering in Lamphel, Althoba voiced COCOMI's disapproval of the Chief Minister's support for a unified Chin-Kuki Mizo nationhood, which would span 3 nations, including territories in Bharat, Myanmar and Bangladesh. The COCOMI warned that his statement could threaten the integrity of Manipur and destabilize the region's socio-political balance. The COCOMI spokesperson, Althoba, also expressed concerns about the implications for Manipur. He said, and I quote, "We recognize that the Chief Minister of Mizoram may have his own political stance. However, his call to integrate Chin-Kuki Mizo populations across 3 nations, including territories in Manipur, directly threaten our state's sovereignty." Let's listen into what Althoba said.
The integration of the Chin-Kuki Jo people from 3 different sovereign countries. They also included the territories of Manipur, where the Kuki separatist group, Kuki separatist armed group has occupied certain districts of the hill areas of Manipur, which is not acceptable. Manipur as an entity, as a political entity, have been existing way much before the state of Mizoram was realized. Mizoram state itself got its statehood from the very agreement called the Mizo Accord. The current Chief Minister of Mizoram, who is also one of the product of the Mizo Accord, Kokomi will not tolerate, and the people of Manipur will never accept the idea of the integration of Chinkuki Mizo people from 3 countries, which will include the territory of Manipur.
Time for yet another short break, and we turn the spotlight on to the US presidential elections. It's a day of reckoning, ladies and gentlemen. They are all going out to vote. Will they decide clearly? This 2-horse race, Trump or Harris? Ambassador Harsh Shingla is already waiting for his comments. See you on the other side.
Brought to you by...
So it's the big election in America between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. While there is so much interest in India and around the world as to who will become the next president of the United States, it ultimately boils down to a bunch of swing states, some important communities, whether they show up at the vote or not. We'll also talk about the Indian American community, whether they are overwhelmingly Democrat or they split. Let's try and find a little bit more about this US election, which is being closely watched, with Dhruv Jaishankar, Executive Director with ORF America. Thank you very much, Dhruv, for speaking with us. So, big picture, I mean, we're a day away from election day. Just how big is this election? What are the stakes?
It's a big election. It feels like every 4 years there's a big election in the US. It's a very divided polity. Roughly 45% of Americans vote Republican, 45% vote Democrat. And really it's only about 5 to 10% whose opinion has to be swayed each election. And the divides are quite deep across age lines, gender lines, cultural lines, rural, urban. I think there's a big divide there. So I think this is playing out again as it is every 4 years.
What do you think it'll boil down to? I mean, in such a close race, is it the swing states? Is it who's motivated more? Is it anti-incumbency? What's the big X factor?
There are lots of X factors, which is what's making it hard to predict. The polls show pretty much a 50-50 split. 7 states will really determine this election. They're called the swing states. I find it hard to believe the winner will not be the winner of Pennsylvania. I think that will be a state that just mathematically, unless many other results go in a very unexpected manner, that's a state that both either candidate will have to win the election.
That's the biggest.
That's the biggest prize.
Swing state.
And the margins are going to be very thin. So ultimately, it'll come down to voter enthusiasm for the 2 candidates. Whether more of Trump supporters come out to vote on election day, or whether more of Harris's voters come out. And that will happen tomorrow, and that will really determine the outcome.
So, one interesting thing, and I guess in elections past, other than the 2021, one new phenomenon we're seeing is a lot of people are voting early,
yes,
either by post or by mail-in, by in-person early voting. I think 75 million is the figure that I last checked. That's almost half the electorate.
Yes.
Is there anything in there for us to know that's perhaps the way in which this election is going?
So that has really changed a large part because of COVID. The last election happened during the pandemic, and that led to a lot more early voting. Traditionally, early voting has favored Democrats, and so those are counted later. That suggests that in many states we'll see a blue wave, a Democratic swing later. But
it's election day in the USA. Polls have opened across the country. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump each need at least 270 electoral votes to win. The battleground states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are expected to be pivotal to the path to victory. Former presidential candidate and Donald Trump supporter Vivek Ramaswamy has said Trump's campaign has attracted greater attention from groups who have historically voted Democrat, including the Black vote, Hispanics and Gen Z. Will America choose Trump or Harris? Victory of which candidate will be better for Bharat? As the historic poll process gets underway, Bharat is watching very, very closely. Zaka Jacob, Managing Editor, CNN News 18, is down in DC. Good early morning to you, Zaka. What's the mood there? Are people coming out to vote? Everybody is concerned about the turnout. Oh, absolutely. I mean, elections are won or lost on which of the two bases is more enthused to come out on election day. I'm coming to you live from Washington, D.C. You can see the White House in the background, just off the south lawns of the White House. I was here just over a year ago, Anand, when the Prime Minister Modi, was feted in the state visit. There was all that pomp and pageantry that was happening right here in these same lawns, the southern lawns of the White House, and I'm back here. And today it feels like something big is going to happen. It feels like America is on the cusp of something big. And I don't just mean that, potentially electing the first ever woman president. That could happen. Yes, it's a very real possibility. Even if Trump were to win, he would be the first president in over 100 years to win one term, lose a re-election, and then come back 4 years later and win a second term. So that too would be pretty historic. So what does this election really boil down to? You mentioned those 7 or so battleground states. There are 3 of them, which are the blue wall states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. For Kamala Harris to win, it's a very narrow and a slightly tighter path to 270. She has to win all of those 3 blue wall states. She has to win Pennsylvania, which is the biggest. She has to win Wisconsin and Michigan. That's the easiest, clearest, and most narrow path to 270 for Kamala Harris. Trump, on the other hand, is leading in the so-called Sun Belt states. He's leading in Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, Arizona. Nevada and Arizona, because they're out west, will take much longer for the results to come. Right. I think what to expect tonight. By 6 o'clock, polls will close in the East Coast. By 7 o'clock, you will have the first big state, which is Georgia, which will report that 16 electoral college votes. 4 years ago, Joe Biden flipped Georgia. The last time a Democrat won Georgia was back in 1992 when Bill Clinton won Georgia, and he was from the South. So I don't expect too many surprises in Georgia. In 7:30 Eastern Time, North Carolina closes. You've had the big hurricane there just a few weeks ago. Yes. That is the number one issue for voters in that state. And the big one is going to be 8 o'clock Eastern Time when Pennsylvania closes. It's the biggest of the battleground states, 19 electoral college votes. As I explained a moment ago, if Harris has to win, she has to win Pennsylvania, which is why in the penultimate day of the campaign, yesterday, Monday, she had 5 rallies. All 5 of those rallies were in Pennsylvania. She realizes that the road to the White House for her, for the Democratic candidate, has to pass through Pennsylvania. Trump, on the other hand, campaigned yesterday in North Carolina, in Michigan, and in Pennsylvania. He has multiple routes to 270 in that sense. But really, I think this election is going to be made or broken on the gender divide. There is evidence to show in the early voting, and remember, almost 80 million Americans, that is almost half the number of people who voted in the last election, they have already voted, either through mail-in ballots or through early in-person voting. And there is evidence to show that the woman vote is breaking for Kamala Harris almost 10% more than it is for Donald Trump. If she manages to turn up that on in-person voting on election day, then she will win the White House. If that number Donald Trump is able to narrow the gap in that number, then Donald Trump will win the White House. Well, any reason you're wearing red tie today? Is there a cue somewhere? No particular reason. No particular reason. All right. I know you got a long day and lots of excitement to cover, but we're going to look at it from the Bharat prism. Which of these 2 leaders is better for Bharat? We're going to swing back to you. He's going to be live. Zaka is going to be live in just about 20 minutes, just enough time that we have to circle back to our guests, and then we'll go back to Zaka and he'll be taking on the broadcast live. Harsh Singla ji is with me. Tom Rose, former senior Trump's advisor, joins us on this broadcast. We also have Lisa Curtis, Senior Fellow and Director of the Indo-Pacific Security Program at CNAS. Former Senate member Raymond Vickery also is with us, author and advisor on the US-India relations, and a former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Trade and Development. My namaste and greetings to everybody. It's poll day. Let's hope it's massive turnout and there is a clear mandate. The Americans vote decisively and it doesn't run into a long-drawn issue of whose election is it and both sides trying to call the elections and it's all confusion and chaos. But Harsh Singla ji, I'm going to keep it India-centric. I'm going to say which of these 2 leaders is better for us as a country?
Well, there's been a lot of information on the issues that are important for both leaders. But let's try and break it down for what it means for us in India. Well, as far as Donald Trump is concerned, we have a fair idea because he was president for 4 years. He is the person who gave Quad a certain amount of prominence, took it to the foreign minister's level. He put the lexicon of the Indo-Pacific into operation by changing the Pacific Command into the Indo-Pacific Command. He was also, we have to remember, the first president who took the step of cutting military aid completely to Pakistan, despite the fact that several presidents before had threatened to do so. So he's taken a number of steps on the strategic plane. Keep in mind also that in his campaign in the last 1 month, he has mentioned the word China 40 times in various ways. I mean, he recognizes the challenge that China poses to the United States and to democracies all over the world. So he has come out in that manner in a certain sense. But what is important for us, for example, is say the energy policy. I mean, Trump says that he will continue to ensure that energy prices are kept low, that he will encourage practices such as fracking, etc. I think for us, keeping energy prices down is very, very important. I mean, it's absolutely critical to countries like ours, developing countries that need to ensure that we have a consistent, and reasonable sort of base on which we can source our energy. There is also the issue of trade, because Trump has facilitated the negotiations for a free trade agreement between our two countries. We couldn't conclude it because we ran out of time, but that is always there on the cards. So trade will become an important aspect of everything that we are going to talk about. And of course, Trump has talked about ending conflicts. Whether he can do that or not is debatable. But the fact that he is talking about bringing a conclusion to some of the, I would say, very, very major regional conflicts which have the propensity to become global conflicts is, I think, music to the ears of a lot of countries in the developing world. That's very, very important, even for India, which would want to see peace and tranquility. And Prime Minister Modi's own efforts in bringing about peace on his visits to Ukraine and Russia testify to our desire there.
True.
On the other hand, Kamala Harris has been a part of the Biden team. The Biden administration has done a lot to reinforce the relationship. I think it was President Biden who called the India-US partnership the defining relationship of the 21st century. And so many of the steps that President Biden took, for example, in taking Quad to the level of the heads of state and government, in ensuring that we have an initiative on strategic and new technologies, the ICET, technology exchanges have become important. I think there is a lot of focus on investments in India through the startups and other areas.
So you're outlining both sides. Is India okay, irrespective of who comes to power, or do we take a side? Do we pick a side here?
I have always maintained that we enjoy bipartisan support for our relationship, that irrespective of who becomes president, the India-US relationship will be very, very important, and that either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris would be good for us.
So we are being smart here, Lisa Curtis. So that's what the former foreign secretary is doing. He's hedging his bets as far as Bharat is concerned or India is concerned. But I'm going to ask you, women have come out, some of the few early voters have said they're voting for reproductive rights. Kamala Harris has said that if democracy has to survive and if America has to be on the path to good, then Trump must not be voted. Where do you stand today? If you look at the global aspect, Vivek Ramaswamy says youth don't want war. They want America to grow and focus on its own growth, its own future further, rather than try and get involved in trying to topple governments abroad and fight other people's wars.
Well, look, I think the United States is still a global leader. I don't think we have the luxury of being able to sort of bow out of what's happening in the rest of the world. So I think, no matter who is elected, they will quickly, see that the U.S. remains a country that has the resources, and a lot of countries are depending on the United States to continue to use its influence throughout the world, whether it's in Europe and the Russia-Ukraine situation, the Middle East, China, Indo-Pacific. So whereas a Trump administration will focus more of its resources on the Indo-Pacific, on China, I think that's clear. I don't think we should expect that a Trump administration would pull back from the rest of the world. But I wanted to say a few words on the Trump administration's policies towards India, because, of course, I served for 4 years in the Trump administration. I was Deputy Assistant to the President and National Security Council Senior Director for South and Central Asia for 4 years, from 2017 to 2021. And what I witnessed firsthand was a clear elevation of the U.S.-India relationship. And Harsh Shringla pointed out many of the aspects of that, I'd like to bring in a few more. You know, we saw the sort of excitement that the Howdy Modi event brought to the United States when he came here in front of the crowds in Texas. We saw the excitement in India when former President Trump addressed the major crowd in Ahmedabad in Gujarat, India in February 2020. We saw, you know, a really successful visit by President Trump. That entire visit, you know, really showed and demonstrated the closeness of Modi and Trump, but also how much they had done to build up the relationship throughout that period. And I would also note the kind of support the Trump administration provided India in its time of crisis, and that's the Gawan border clashes in the spring of 2020. The Trump administration extended a great deal of support to India, including intelligence support, military equipment, you know, all kinds of support during that crisis. So I think we can rest assured that President Trump, if he takes another term in office, would pick up where he left off. And I have no doubt that the U.S.-India relationship would continue to move forward. You know, there are a few more questions about Vice President Harris. On the one hand, as Harsh Ringlaw pointed out, there might be some continuity, and the Biden administration certainly has focused a great deal of attention on India. You have the ISET technology dialogue, which has taken off, and you know, the agreement to co-produce jet engine technology. So there's no doubt that Biden has continued to build up the U.S.-India relationship. But at the same time, you know, she may be slightly different in how she handles the relationship. So she's a bit more of an unknown quantity when it comes to U.S.-India relations.
True. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Joe Biden have a very old relationship, more than a decade old, even at the time when he was vice president under the Obama tenure presidency. PM Narendra Modi knows him from those times. So there is an old friendship and perhaps a certain connect at that time. Although many would question which way the US-India ties are actually going, given the Five Eyes involvement, given this entire K extremism and the K bogey, etc. But Tom Rose, I'm very curious to understand, why does Donald Trump evoke such extreme reactions? And is Donald Trump perhaps a different person in terms of political outlook and strategy compared to his first tenure this time around?
I don't think he's any different at all. I think the Donald Trump that you and I and everyone else watches on television, listens to, is precisely the same Donald Trump that Lisa Curtis and I listened to privately every day for 4 years in the White House. The fact is that a strong America, a proud America, a resurgent America, strong economically, with presidential authority delivered with a mandate, is good not just for the United States, but for the world. The U.S.-India relationship is probably the most important bilateral relationship in the world between strategic partners. There's a famous story that Lisa Curtis, I'm sure, is familiar with. Our former colleague, my boss, Lisa's boss, Mike Pompeo, who was the Secretary of State, talking about deterrence, pointing out that when Richard Nixon was president, he had to send Henry Kissinger to Moscow to warn the Kremlin that Nixon could be a bit crazy. But as Pompeo says, Pompeo never had to warn any potential enemy that Trump was a madman or that he would stand beside any friend, because CNN did all of that for him. Donald Trump's credibility extends directly toward the fact that he's unpredictable. In the last 4 years, we have seen China nearly double its defense spending relative to GDP, while in the United States, our military spending relative to GDP has declined. You combine that with this colossal failure of American deterrence, from surrendering Afghanistan to the Taliban in such a calamitous, embarrassing, humiliating manner, our utter failure to deter President Putin from invading Eastern Europe, Ukraine, and now our utter complete failure not simply to deter Iran from creating chaos, mayhem, and war in the Middle East, but actually enabling them. this half-hearted support for Israel and its war for survival. What would the next 4 years look like if that continues? And that's what should terrify not simply every American, but frankly everyone, in my humble opinion, in the world that realizes we need stability and an equilibrium with American deterrence restored.
But with someone like Trump, who's unpredictable, like you said, Tom Rose, and I'm going to request Raymond Vickery to share his thoughts here. What's going to happen? Thank you for your patience. Many in here over in India say Trump is equal to tariffs, because when it comes to trade, he was insistent upon tariffs. I remember how he would go on about the Harley Davidson, etc., and what he had to say when he wanted HCL during the COVID times. But others believe that he is somewhere far more amenable in terms of a conducive atmosphere for economies to grow. He may be a little isolationist in terms of trying to make America great again, this entire MAGA theme. But what's your thought process? There are others who believe that the Biden administration and continuity with Harris is actually better. Where do you stand?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I have noted with some amusement, really, this idea that unpredictability and a person who can't be known to what he's going to do next is actually good for U.S.-India relations. That's preposterous to me. On the issue of tariffs, it's true, Donald Trump is in love with tariffs. He put tariffs on India in steel and aluminum, which the Biden administration really had to walk back in regard to our good friend and partner, India. And now he's really doubled down on the idea of some sort of economic fortress America, and having 10 to 20% tariffs with friend and foe alike across the board, and that somehow this disengagement economically is going to benefit the average man and woman in India as well as the U.S. That's crazy. The idea that you can disengage like that you can put tariffs on India and not have it leak over into the relationship is just wrong. The fact is that the economic matters and geopolitical ones are linked. And there's no question to me that continuing what has happened with the Biden administration in terms of economic engagement is the right way to go. Having said that, I would subscribe to the proposition that there is strong bipartisan agreement, both at a presidential as well as a congressional level, for the U.S.-India relationship. But let's hope that we have some steadiness at the helm, that it's not unpredictable, that you don't try to make progress by not letting people know what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. And I want to say something about this howdy Modi business. You know, last time around, India made the mistake of going all in, really, on Donald Trump. And they did howdy Modi, and it was really a political rally from the Trump perspective to try to get votes. But what has happened this time, of course, is India has played it a lot more intelligently, and that is Trump had announced, yeah, I'm meeting with Modi at the time of the Quad meeting in the U.S., and I'm the guy that's closest, and so forth. And India backed off from that. There was no meeting with Trump, and quite wisely, in my view, looked at the broader connections of democracy, of geopolitical interests vis-a-vis China, and has built on those rather than picking sides in this. I would also just add that from a personal perspective, Kamala Harris has an Indian mother, And she has, at almost every turn, talked about her mother in terms of the kinds of values which really emanate from her mother's background in India as being put forward. So
well, how much of that is with truly acknowledging her Indian roots, or is it to try and woo the Indo-American vote? That we will leave it. It's interesting to see. I would love to sit on the fence on this one. So would Ambassador Harsh Shringla, because it's like a Tom Rose and Raymond Vickery. We'd like to see you through the course of these elections and have you all back and have a conversation soon. But I have to keep this short right now. I have to wind up. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much. Going straight across to Zakir Jacob. He's there at the South Lawns with the White House at the background. And who's going to walk into that? Zakir Jacob, as you join us on this very, very special broadcast. Are you willing to take a punt, or are you going to sit and watch it like a referee as they go ping pong?
Well, I will tell you at 8 o'clock tonight Eastern Time. That's 6:30 a.m. tomorrow morning.
I look forward to that.
I think, a lot of people have been saying, we're not going to get the result tonight. It's going to be like 2020. The election got over on Tuesday. The result eventually, the networks called it on Saturday. I don't think we'll have to wait for 4 days. I hope we don't have to wait for 4 days. I think it'll boil down to Pennsylvania. Whoever wins Pennsylvania will win the White House. I think it's as simple as that. If Harris wins Pennsylvania, and it is a must-win for her, then she will win the White House. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, then that's the end of the night. So I think it really boils down to that one state. That state closes at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The difference
for
this
us,
time compared to 2020
your show all the way.
Was that in...
Take it away.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so welcome to this special edition of The Race for the White House. We're coming to you live from just off the South Lawns of the White House. The beautiful structure that was built way back in the 17th century overlooking us. And really, we're at the cusp of history, either way that you look at it. If Kamala Harris wins, the White House gets the first ever woman resident, the first ever woman president of the United States. She will be the 47th president of the US.